Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the August 28th, 2013 meeting of the Lowell Conservation Commission. And if I can remind those in attendance, kindly silence or turn off any electronic devices, cell phones, pagers, or whatnot. If they go off during the meeting, I will ask you to leave. First item on the agenda is a request for determination of applicability, continued. I don't know if we opened this or not, but it says continued from July 24th, 2013, Mass Department of Transportation. Project location is Princeton Boulevard. Sidewalk repair, including wheelchair ramp installation, tree removal, stump grinding, repaving, and curb resetting at 3 locations along Princeton Boulevard between Whiteman Street, Windsor Street, across Black Brook, and within the 100-year floodplain and wetland buffer bank, bordering vegetated wetlands, bordering land subject to flooding and riverfront. At the request of their engineer, they are requesting a continuance to our next meeting, which would be the first meeting in September. What's the date on that? September 8th? Okay.
11th.
September 11th? Okay, all right. And they also have another project that's coming before us on that date. All right. Do I have a motion to continue at the request of the proponent?
I'll make a motion to continue at the request of the proponent.
Seconded by?
Second.
Commissioner Varna, motion by Commissioner Lynch. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. All right. Moving on to the next items on the agenda. We had treated these as one item. There are 3 separate notices of intent. We're going to continue to treat them as one item. However, they ultimately will have to be voted on as 3 separate projects. But for the sake of discussion and the sake of presentation, it makes sense to treat them all together. I'll call them all separately. First item is notice of intent, continued from the July 24th, 2013 meeting, Swan Street Development Company, LLC, concerning DEP file number 2060716. Project location is 160.1 Swan Street, and that's the road. It's construction of a roadway, drainage, associated grading, and utilities within the wetland buffer zone for the construction of a 7-lot subdivision, also associated bordering vegetated wetlands. The next item is also a notice of intent, also continued from the July 24th, 2013 meeting, Swan Street Development Co., LLC, concerning DEP file number 206, I believe it's 0717. That would be, hold on, I have it. This is lot 5. No, lot 5 is 0718, so that's 2060718. Project location is 160.1 Swan Street, also known as lot 5, and it's construction of a single-family home, driveway, and associated grading within the wetland buffer zone on lot 5, also bordering vegetated wetlands. And the third part of this project is a notice of intent, also continued from the July 24th, 2013 meeting, Swan Street Development Company, LLC, concerning DEP file number 2060717. Project location is 160.1 Swan Street, also known as Lot 6, and the construction of a single-family home, driveway, and associated grading within the wetland buffer zone on Lot 6, also bordering vegetated wetlands. Attorney Plunkett, if you could kindly identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, David Plunkett, representing the applicant, Swan Street Development, LLC. Here with me tonight is Dan Corvus of DK Engineering, and also Roland Mainville from Ram Construction, who will be the developer doing the construction on the site. Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to Mr. Corvus. I think that all the issues have been addressed in terms of the technical aspects of the design of the system to deal with the issues at the site. In addition, I did bring for your review a reference to the intent of the developer to include in the deed or any deeds out for the lots going to the ultimate buyers of these lots, specific reference to the homeowners association, specific reference to the order of conditions that will be coming from the Conservation Commission relative to conditions that will remain in effect even post certificate of compliance. And then also specific to Lot 5, the specific reference to the easement area, and the intent of that easement area is for the allowance of anyone with any responsible party under the homeowners association trust to enter upon that easement area to carry out the duties set forth. Also sent to you for your review the homeowners association trust, which spells out the obligation of each unit, each lot owner to be a member of the trust, and that it will be their obligation to maintain that area in accordance with the project's stormwater report, stormwater facility operation and maintenance plan. So with that, unless there's any questions on that specific area about language for the deeds, I would turn it over to to Mr. Corvus as the engineer.
Yeah, with respect to that, regrettably, we just got this.
Yeah.
And just before the meeting, so I've tried to read through it quickly, but has the city law department had a chance to review this yet?
Not this particular draft. This is a derivative of a draft that was vetted by the law department and the city engineer for a previous subdivision project that was approved by the planning board. It's a Berkeley Ave extension. So it's the general language that we've been looking for on subdivisions such as these, where there's some sort of stormwater infiltration system that needs maintenance, ongoing maintenance. And so the language is actually provided from us to the applicant.
Okay.
As a model for which to use, from which to use.
Okay.
The plan that was approved at this point in time was strictly limited to those lots 1 and 2 at the front near the Bigelow Street area, and then just a reference to what was then, I think the reference was Lot A1, which has now been broken into the subdivision for the 5 additional lots. But it's the same format, the same concept in terms of the lot owners to be responsible, and ultimately also for the rights of the city of Lowell in the event that the homeowners don't carry out their responsibilities under the homeowners trust. And again, this is coming from the city to have that included, that the city of Lowell could step in there, do what is necessary, and then charge the lot owners with the cost of carrying out the maintenance plan if they failed to do so.
Okay, I guess I didn't get that far. I got through about 8 pages of it of 11, so where was that, do you know?
Yeah, it is near the...
Or maybe I just missed it, but...
Yeah, section 5.1.1.
I guess I skipped right over it.
It indicates that if the trust fails to maintain the drainage system and related infrastructure, the city of Lowell may enter onto the land and do the work that is required. And then that cost associated for the city of Lowell having to undertake what's supposed to be the responsibility of the homeowners trust will then be the ability of the city to impose a lien for reimbursement for those costs against those homeowners.
All right, okay. I was kind of looking for something like that. I guess I glanced right over that. Do we know, with respect to the prior instances where this sort of format was used, how large those projects were?
Yeah, the Berkeley Street extension was a 3-lot subdivision, so it was similar in scale to this. That was really the first time that we worked with the law department and city engineer to develop this language, and that was, this is 2, maybe 3 years old, so it's fairly recent language.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
but same scale.
Okay. I'm just, my biggest concern, Attorney Plunkett, is that with these small-ish subdivisions that, you don't want the homeowners to get together and say, well, we're not going to do anything about it, They have a street barbecue and everyone just decides, well, we're not going to do anything about it. So, usually in a much larger project, it's, you have a professional management company there and there's someone looking over the shoulder and sort of enforcing it all the time, so.
Well,
For the
I think the
mutual
leverage
benefit.
point would be with the specter of the city coming in there.
Yeah,
And
okay.
they would then lose this control. I think the incentive when people have the ability to do it on their own volition, control the cost by, deciding who's going to do the work and making certain that it's done properly, as opposed to, a governmental entity which may not have, wants to get it done quickly, and hey, their attitude would probably be, hey, it's your fault, you didn't do it, we're just going to go on and have it done, whatever the cost is, that's what it is.
Right.
And that's-
I guess I guess that answers or allays a lot of my concerns with respect to that. However, one still remains, and it's sort of a biggie, and that's that and I understand that there's going to be an easement on, what is this, Lot 5? There's going to be an easement, access easement and whatnot, and includes, a pretty much comprehensive easement for access to for this system. But I've been racking my brain over the last couple weeks trying to think of another subdivision that we've done that has a residential infiltrator system, detention area, retention area, and I couldn't come up with one that was located on a habitable lot. They've all been, the water treatment area has always been on its own lot. And that, and it's like part of I wouldn't say part of the street, because then the city would take responsibility of it, but it's owned by the homeowners association. So I guess what concerns me there is, is this going to devolve into some sort of Lot 5 against lots, 1 through 4 and 6 through 8, or, you see what I'm saying?
Well, the legality of it will be that it will be clearly something that is there. It will be something of record on the homeowners association trust, on the subdivision plan. And I think, from feedback from the commission, specific language in the deed itself also that is going to be absolutely clear that this is there, this is the purpose. And I don't see that it's going to be something from the Mr. Carvis would, be able to give more detail in terms of the capacity of this system, that it's not something that has to be done on a monthly basis or weekly basis, that these are things that are there and that they work, and they work for sustained periods of time. So it's not really going to be something that there's going to be this intrusive activity on a regular basis, but it's something that the people who own that property really, it probably from the perspective of impact, it would be more a matter of marketing the property for the sale of it, that people coming in to buy will have to be, they're going to be aware up front and know, and, I suppose that's the biggest impact, more from the developer in terms of the marketing and sale of the property, rather than the implementation and the rights, excuse me, the legality of there being an easement imposed over the area as designated, and the rights to utilize that easement for the purpose set forth, and that there's really no restraint to prevent anyone withstanding, which would be any of the unit owners or lot owners, I keep saying unit owners, lot owners, or the association as a collective entity, or the city of Lowell. And, there could be no legal standing of anyone who takes title to a property where it's an easement area clearly delineated on their land, and a reference in the deed under which they take title to all the elements that we described, being the association, the Conservation Commission order of conditions with the continuing, conditions that continue after the certificate of compliance, and, specific to the Lot 5, the detail of the intent of the easement that's reserved for the purpose of carrying out this, this plan. Sometimes I think the legality, the only catch, in terms of imposition is sometimes when something's put on the plan, there isn't sufficient specification of what the easement is, or the reservation of the easement, or the definition of the easement and the rights thereunder. And so this here, we've got it being defined in 3 places: the plan, the trust, and in the deed out to the individual unit owner. So I think it really covers any and all possible angles in terms of, that there would be absolutely no standing for anyone to object or claim ignorance, or try to stop anyone from carrying forward with the easement that will be granted and reserved against that property.
And just one final question through you to your engineer, but I'm going to ask you to stay in case there's any more questions from the commission for you. What's the service life on this system?
I've talked to Dan Pelletier with ADS and Storm Tech. He said that he's unaware of any of them ever failing other than during construction where it was constructed improperly. But he said once the systems are installed, he's never heard of one failing.
How long have they been doing them for?
I
we've
believe-
started seeing them about 10 years ago, so.
I believe he said that he's been working with them for about 30 years.
All right.
But to his knowledge, he's never heard of one failing.
Okay. All right, and Attorney Plunkett. I was thinking maybe instead of a house, we could put a slots parlor on this lot instead, but.
With, that went down in flames, so.
All right, is there any questions for Attorney Plunkett from the commission? And then we can move on to the engineer.
I got a couple quick questions, just to confirm. The easement is specific to, I'm assuming there's anything associated with maintenance of those 2 catch basins that are draining towards that infiltration gallery, just to make sure that it functions properly. So in the event that if it's plugged up and it's not at the catch basin, it turns out to be a failure of the infiltration gallery, the association would have the ability to access that property and make any necessary repairs.
Yes, and it's the trust makes reference to the specifics set forth in the Stormwater Facility Operation and Maintenance Plan, which is entitled Project Stormwater Report, as part of the submittal that sets forth all the details in regards to the system itself and what's necessary to maintain and properly, keep it in proper working condition.
And I notice in one of the submittals with regard to the concern that was raised by the commission about any sort of load-bearing movable object on that infiltration gallery causing any sort of impact or impairment of the gallery, it looks like that's probably not a concern if we have a maximal axle load of 32,000 pounds.
Yes, yeah.
I'm assuming the deed is specific to a no build over that infiltration gallery, so the buyer of the property recognizes they can't put a shed or some other structure over that.
Yeah, I think if that's a good question or point, and actually what we'll do is we'll add language in terms of the specifics to the owner of Lot 5 in terms of, I think that's inferred, but again, to make specific, it's better that there shall be no building on that area.
I mean, a selling point is the owner of Lot 5 has an large open space next to their house. The considerations that they would need to have in purchasing that lot is A, the easement, and B, being clear that you would not want to build anything above that infiltration gallery, because obviously in the event that it needs to be repaired, we don't want to be taking down structures.
Yeah, the only issue, I guess, would be that, I would say no permanent structure, or that if someone had
A small shed
or
or something, or,
that could be moved and
or a
these.
kiddie pool, something
Yeah,
like that.
but we will say there'll be no building of any permanent nature over the.
That would,
easement area.
that would hinder the ability to access the,
Sure.
yeah, something like that.
No, and again, I think it's inferred, but let's hit anything
Yeah,
that. make
if
it
I could
specific.
interject, I think what Attorney Plunkett is trying to say, that the very nature of the easement itself, I think, is, you know, legally speaking, if you put something there, it's at the risk that it's not going to be there when access is required, and the removal is by bulldozer or most efficient means possible. So,
Just be nice to notify the owner ahead of
yeah,
time.
well, I mean, obviously, the homeowner would have an opportunity to do that, but, you know, you know, again, I mean, that's, for me, I'm comfortable with just easement language, but if you're more comfortable with, you know, no semi-permanent or permanent structures, that's fine too. It doesn't bother me.
I think ambiguity in this case
All right.
runs a risk.
I would have no problem adding the language saying that the homeowner will not be, understands except that there will be no allowance for the building of any type of permanent
And we don't have to get into
structure.
so much detail, but I'm just saying, I think something a little bit less ambiguous would be
Sure.
helpful to a
Okay.
uninformed
No, that's fine.
buyer. Thank you.
Okay.
And as far as structures, I would think that no trees should be planted on top of that either.
Yeah.
As far as the roots going down.
Okay. All right, so we would.
I mean, some shrubs would probably be okay, but, for instance, if you plant an oak tree there, you might have a problem.
If I may, just interject on that point that you're making, Commissioner Varnum. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, there's 9 inches between the top of the structure and the top of the soil. So it might be good to include a restriction on planting of shrubs as well. It
Okay.
might just be sod. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
The total cover over the system is 2.5 feet, but there's, I believe, 9 inches above the stone to the lawn area, to a minimum of 9 inches. But the total is 2 feet, 3 inches, or 4 inches. That's the minimum.
Could I just ask
Right,
what
that
the,
would be fine. We will also include the language in regards to trees and shrubs.
could I ask what the failure of this system would look like? What would happen?
What happens in the maintenance is, the primary function of the maintenance is to inspect it. There are portholes that allow you to inspect it. If the water's not draining within 72 hours, as it's required to, then they can dig up that section of it and, well, they can vacuum it for one. They can stick vacuums in there and pull out any of the silt or sediment that might have accumulated. They can also, if it were a total failure, which, you know, if it were a total failure, what they could do is dig it up and replace the stone underneath the chambers. That would be a total failure.
Would there be water collecting on the surface of the infiltration system?
No, no, there's a small outlet, an overflow, just as what's required for a detention basin or an infiltration basin. If something were to happen, there's a little outflow that would allow the water to come out. But the biggest maintenance issue would be maintaining the catch basins. Because the only way the silt can get in there is from the catch basins. They're specified with 4-foot sumps and hoods to minimize any transport of sediments to the detention base, the infiltration system, but they do have to be vacuumed out periodically, and that's specified in the report.
Are there any questions for Attorney Plunkett? All right.
Okay,
And
then I'll turn
the
it over to
engineer, yeah.
Mr. Corvus.
At the last meeting, there was several...
Just if you could
Oh, I'm
identify
sorry.
yourself for the record.
My name's Dan Corvus with DK Engineering. Just to mention that at the last meeting, we had several comments and concerns, which I've addressed in a letter that's dated August 15th. I believe there were 7 items in here. If you'd like, I can go through each one of them and explain what we did. All right, well, the first one, the first 2 had to do with adding additional information like building dimensions, patios, decks, pop-outs, walkways. We added additional ties to tie the building down to the property lines so they could be easily recognized as where they should be. The next concern had to do with the catch basin. We had 1 catch basin at the end of the cul-de-sac. I added another catch basin. There was some discussion about putting it in the middle of the cul-de-sac, but that doesn't really work because you need some way of ponding above the catch basin in order for the water to go in. So what I did is I put them on both sides coming into the center of the to the end of the cul-de-sac, so that the water coming down both sides of the street will enter each one of them. And if they overflow, they go to the other one. I think there's a 2-inch difference in elevation between the rims of the 2 catch basins. Let's see, infiltration. Oh, another concern was the infiltration trench that we had along the westerly side of the property. There was a concern that the homeowner could fill it in or plant trees or bushes in there that would interfere with it. What I did is I eliminated the infiltration trench that was there and instead added 3 more rooftop infiltration systems. In doing that, I had to redo the calculations for the drainage system. And in doing it, I went from the ADS pipes, which is a perforated, I believe it was 30-inch pipe, that would collect the water from the catch basins and go into the infiltration system. And I changed it to the chambers. I had a conversation with Storm Tech, and they said for the amount of pipe that's required, the system as it's located and how it's going to function, it would be better with the chambers than the pipes. So I made that change while I was doing the changes in the drainage calculations. We talked, I believe it was mentioned about the load, the axle load, the maximum axle load over the system is 32,000 pounds. That's, again, in talking with Storm Tech, the maintenance of that is not an issue. You can drive most equipment that you could put in there to work on it without any problems. And that's for a 2-foot of cover. With 3 foot of cover, you'd have a fully loaded dump truck could drive over it. We've got, at the very end of it, 2 foot 4 inches. In other parts of it, there's more than that. There may be 3 feet, there may be 3.5 feet. So in the beginning of the system, there's plenty of, plenty of strength even to drive a truck over. And the last one that I had in there was the ownership and maintenance of the infiltration system, which I believe has already been discussed. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Yeah, I have a very small copy of a plan with the revision date. Last revision would be July 30th. Is that the last?
Yes.
Revision, okay. Did we get detail, do we have a detail of Lot 5 showing the easement on the property?
Yes, on page 2 of the subdivision plan, there's the lotting plan that shows the easement with all the dimensions on it. If you want, I can flip it up on, I've got a full set of plans here. What's that?
Yeah, it's just the plans we have are tiny. It's, oh, I didn't even see that, it's so small. Oh, we have full-size plan, okay, all right. I guess it's just a copying issue. That's not a problem. This just may be a remnant that got careless mouse click or some, I don't know what it is. To the southeast of the driveway to Lot 4, right on the cul-de-sac, on the edge of the road surface, there appears to be a catch basin with a drain line heading towards the north. What is that?
What page are you on?
It's on all of them. It's on page 3, it's on page 4.
There is a... You're right, it is a remnant.
Okay. All right, that's not one of the, it's part of the street, but it's not one of the
No, that
plans
shouldn't
that
be
we're
there.
considering, but it is part of the street, but,
Was there at one time, but he moved them.
all right. Yeah, I see how you're running 2 drain lines into the Caltech system. As opposed to the 2 catch basins with 2 lines, is there a reason for that as to linking them in series? I mean, is that I mean, it seems to me that would be a more economical solution.
The way I was looking at it is if there is any kind, if it's not maintained, if something happens in the catch basin, there's an issue with it, then the water, or if something blocks one of the catch basins, it'll spill over to the other one and there's nothing to restrict it. I just thought that might be a better design. In addition to that, you've got stone inside the chambers. If you have the 2 pipes going in, it reduces the flow going to each one, so the velocity is reduced even more.
Okay. All right. Just give me a second. I just want to check my notes from the last time we were here. All right. No, we have a semi-larger copy. I don't have any further questions. Commissioner Varnum?
We have a very irregular line of the wetland in the corner of Lot 5. And normally, when we have a wetland on a property, we like to mark it somehow so that the future homeowner knows that that's an area that shouldn't be filled in or dug out or changed in any way. This is a little difficult due to the shape of it, but could you propose some way to mark that with either signage or posts or stone markers or something that's going to be fairly permanent?
Signage would probably be the best way in this instance.
The applicant would like to put in signage to address that.
That'd be the most specific way. If you put in a post, you have directions.
Sir, if you could approach and identify yourself for the record.
Roland Mainville, 16 Woodbury Way, Drake, Mass. I would think in this situation, signage would be the most preferable because you just put directions that you cannot fill in this area, and you put it in 2 or 3 areas in that location, and it's self-explanatory.
Metal posts or something that won't rot?
You would put galvanized sign. Thanks.
Thank you. Right now.
Commissioner Lovely?
I have no further questions. I think the applicant answered all our questions from the last meeting. Thank you.
Commissioner Lynch?
No question.
Commissioner Biedron?
No questions, but I actually like that you have the 2 catch basins with 2 points of access. I think it's a good idea. Just in case one does get clogged up, it's always good to have 2 points of access.
Right.
Yep.
Commissioner Gordon?
No questions.
Great. All right, any further comments from engineering or?
Oh, yeah. The only other thing that we could recommend regarding some of the concerns that were raised on the maintenance of the structure post-construction is that there, as a part of the stormwater maintenance plan, there needs to be an annual report that is created. There's no requirement that it's submitted to the Conservation Commission, but at least for the initial 3 years, it might make sense to include a condition in the order that an annual report is submitted for the Conservation Commission's review to make sure that, at least in the outset, that maintenance is occurring as required.
Sir, please take it outside.
The other element to that is the ongoing condition could allow the commission to request a report at any point, just to make sure that that's being done regularly. But at least for the first 3 years, that would be submitted for your review.
All right, that certainly can be built into the order of conditions. Is there anyone here who would like to offer their comments or concerns regarding, and again, this is 3 separate projects. It's the roadway, it's Lot 5 and Lot 6. The roadway concerns buffer zone work, and the infiltrator, Lot 6 is merely buffer zone work, and Lot 5 is more extensive work in buffer zone and with respect to the infiltrator itself. One last question for the engineer. I noticed on Lot 5 there's no separate roof drainage infiltrator. Is that tied in directly into the larger Cultec system?
No, it's not. In doing the calculations, I determined that it wasn't necessary to have that because there was enough infiltration and reduction in the peak rate of runoff, so that it wasn't necessary.
All right. So that one's just going to sheet flow the way it does now?
Right.
Okay. All right. Even with the change of elevations that you're putting on the property?
Yes.
Your calculations included that?
Yes. As a matter of fact, it's going to slow it down even more because what we've got is a 1 or 2% grade over the system, where before it fell down quicker.
All right, it slowed it down, but you've also put a barrier into the groundwater system too, so there's going to be some lateral movement once it hits the system, or does it infiltrate from the top of the system?
It'll infiltrate from the top because of the slow flow rate, the velocity that's going. But by slowing it down, it allows more of it to infiltrate into the grass.
All right. Okay, is there anyone here who'd like to offer their comments or concerns? Yes, sir.
Ken Harkins, 110 Bigelow Street. I guess my question is, they talked about the infiltration system, and I didn't hear them guaranteeing how many years it would last. And perhaps they should be able to put that into the homeowners association, how long they would have before they had to dig into their pocket or have some money put aside for it, like to do at a condo association. The other thing is, when they knocked down 61 Swan Street, all the houses along on the street still have their septic systems in the backyard or the front yard. Is there any provision for taking care of the stuff that's going to be found when they dig that up or run over it and cave it in?
Say that part again, I didn't catch that.
They have septic systems in the houses. All the streets on Bigelow Street have septic systems still there. They tied into the city, but they never filled them in or closed them up. The one at 61 that they knocked down still has that system there, the tank.
Okay, that's a public health department issue. That's not our, Title V are not our issues.
I was just wondering if that was something that was appropriate here, so
No.
they'd be aware of it being there also.
It's not our issue. We couldn't do anything about it if we wanted to, so,
Okay,
okay.
all right, thank you very much.
Your other question, though, with respect to the life, the question was asked. I don't think there's any guarantee as to how long it lasts. This isn't the first time this commission has seen these types of systems. The technology isn't exactly new, but it's not old either. In the scope of, will it last 50 years, 60 years, 100 years? who knows?
Yeah.
What I can tell you from what I understand of them, and I've done a lot of reading on them throughout the years, is there's no moving parts to these things, okay? Once they're kind of put in, they're sort of set and forget type systems. The biggest enemies to them failing, from what I understand, is a lot of debris getting into them, a lot of fine silt that gets in and can clog up the infiltration of it. It gets in and sort of solidifies and turns into like a sludgy clay, or almost like a loose concrete, so to speak, that never really hardens, kind of like a mud that's just that fine silt. The only way anything can get into the system is through the catch basins, and those are designed to really prevent that. And they should be cleaned out on a fairly regular basis. The system itself can be inspected, and in the event of, failure, what will happen is, in a situation like this, is the overflow, which is that section to the south, will just, after a rain event, it will just continuously discharge. And it really shouldn't be discharging at all. Okay, so if it's observed that it's just after a rain event that's just continuously discharging, then there's something wrong with the system. And it needs to be looked at in that particular instance.
Okay, thank you. The other thing was, the last time we were here, you were talking about you needed to see where all their decks were going to go, the footprint for the decks and everything, so wouldn't interfere with the wetlands?
Yeah, they've done that.
They did that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to offer their comments or concerns, either for or against this project? Is there anyone else who would like to offer their comments or concerns, either for or against this project? All right, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll motion to close the public hearing.
By Commissioner Biedron, seconded by
Second.
Commissioner Gordon. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. All right. Now, we have, and that's I should clarify, that's the public hearing on all three projects, so we're not going to take three separate votes. I don't think we need to. However, we do need to take three separate motions and three separate votes on the projects themselves, though. So if we can start, let's start with the roadway. This is DEP file number 2060716.
I'll motion to issue a standard City of Lowell order of conditions for the roadway.
All right, any additional special conditions?
I don't think we need them, right? Are they going to be on more of the drainage?
Yeah, at a very minimum, I'd like to see, in association with the Caltech system, some, at least annual inspections of the catch basins and a report on it to the commission as to their, I'm assuming, again, this isn't something we've never seen before. This is a fairly standard hooded catch basin. But just, prior to on the filing for a COC that,
Yeah.
yeah, that they're working and functioning properly. And
So do we want an annual report for 3 years?
yep.
That's what okay.
I mean, I'd like to see something like that.
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion?
Do we want that report submitted to the conservation and
Yes.
engineers?
Yeah, I would say yes. As part of their O&M. All right, so seconded by Commissioner Lovely. All in favor signify by saying aye. Commissioner Gordon?
Aye.
Commissioner Lovely? Commissioner Varnum? Chair is yes. Commissioner Lynch?
Aye.
Commissioner Biedron?
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. So the roadway passes. Moving on to We'll take these in order. Lot 5, this is the one with the Cultec system. This is DEP file number 2060718.
I'll make a motion to issue a standard City of Lowell order of conditions with the special condition that the homeowner on Lot 5 not to build anything permanent on their drainage easement and plantings is, can we get that listed in the deed? Is in the deed.
Yes.
And a
Yeah,
second
there's the letter of August 28th has the homeowners association trust. And, you know, we should make that, we should, we should make that a part of, all three. Maybe we should make an amended motion on the street to include the homeowners trust. Is the city attorney Plunkett going to be taking this street over?
It will be a public way.
All right. Yeah, and well, let's get a motion just to start a discussion on it, so.
Can we add to that motion?
Sure.
One other special condition
Do we
based
have a
on,
motion yet?
I made a motion.
All right.
and just add to, based on what Commissioner Varnum said.
Do I have a second on the motion?
Second.
All right, by Commissioner Gordon. All right, so the motion is Lowell Standard Order with special condition for no permanent structures and language in the deed to reflect that, together with inclusion of the language that was submitted by the applicant
Yep.
with the homeowners association trust to be established.
Permanent structures and plantings.
Say that again?
Permanent structures and plantings.
Okay, all right. Now,
I'd like to amend that
okay,
motion to add a second special condition to add signage to delineate the edge of the wetland on Lot 5.
say that again?
We were talking earlier about the need to delineate the edge of the wetland on Lot 5, and so as part of that order of conditions, could we add in a special condition that signage be placed along the edge of the wetland to notify the landowner where that wetland boundary is?
Okay, so that's in addition, that's to add language to it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's, and what and it's something I had discussed with the applicant, I believe 2 weeks ago. We didn't have a quorum, but we had discussed this, and typically what the commission does in a situation where we have an easement for a detention area is that we make the conditions that are pertinent to this easement permanent. So a COC would not release these conditions. They would remain as a permanent part of the lot. So, for instance, like the homeowners association, the deed restriction, the additional language with respect to the signage and whatnot, those would remain as permanent conditions on the lot. So if a COC were to issue, you're not going to have the homeowner going, oh, we got a COC, and they can take the signage down, and all of the homeowners association gets abolished and stuff like that. That's to remain as permanent conditions, on the lot. So, and again, as part of the roadway, Lot 5, Lot 6, so it's all of them. Okay, we don't have jurisdiction over the other lots, but it would be our strong recommendation that ultimately to the planning board, that they adopt the homeowners association. This, I believe you still need to go before the planning board on this, or need to complete with the planning
Yes,
board. on this,
Mr. Chairman, the planning board at the last hearing, I think we were pretty well set, but they wanted to get a final determination from Concom before they made their final vote. So I think we're, September 5th, we're scheduled to go before the planning board. And could I just ask for a clarification on the planting? is that's specific to the area over the system itself, that, you know, long edges and things of that sort that might be within the drainage easement? We're not saying that there can't be any plantings there, it's just over the
I, for one, don't have a problem with any plantings other than trees because, you know, a tree obviously is going to weigh more than 32,000 pounds once it's fully matured. But you'd hate to see a tree, its roots infiltrate into the system and destroy it. But,
Because
you know,
the
I mean, I think,
delineation of the easement area itself does go out and extends beyond the system, the underground system itself.
right.
So, you know, if we could have clarifications, just not over the
Structure.
underground system
Well,
itself.
yeah, well, I would
Or-
say such that the drip line, because the roots will extend out to the drip line of the tree, so I would say, you know, such that the drip line of the tree, whatever that, you know, if it's a maple or an oak or something, you know, you're gonna have a 20-foot radius at least. So even that, it shouldn't be any closer than, you know, 10 to 15 feet to the edge of the Coltech system, so. All right, so we have,
Does the city of Lowell might have, I don't know, this, like a bylaw that you can't plant things in an easement. So the fact that you're calling, like, I know you can't plant things in a sewer easement, why would a drainage easement be differently?
well,
So,
you can't, but people do routinely, and then they're very
Yeah.
shocked when the city needs to replace a line, and they just, you know, plow through you know, they don't even bother to, they just
Yeah.
stick a backhoe through it, and, you know, people are upset all the time, but hey, you're not supposed to plant, you know, put anything permanent.
but it's almost like, do you need that whole area as the drainage easement? If they made the drainage easement only over the drainage system, then the homeowner could do whatever they wanted in the rest of their land.
Yeah, I think, I agree with the size of the easement. It needs to be accessible from, you know, a larger area than
Yeah.
the Coltech system itself.
All right.
But I would think that in a situation like this, you know, to me, shrubbery and stuff doesn't really bother me. It could actually kind of beautify the area a little bit, you know, and demarc it a little bit, and it would be kind of a minimally invasive type of, you know, type of activity where, you know, they could get through. And there's clean-out traps to this, aren't there? Yeah, so, I mean, there is methods to access the system without catastrophic, you know, comprehensive digging to get at it, so.
Did you already record the easement? It's not, is it already taken? Is the easement already recorded and taken?
No, nothing, because we have to
Nothing's
wait for the approvals and the subdivision approval and everything else, but the language that we submitted, excuse me, does make reference that we will add to the deeds, that the trust, when the final approval from planning board, their approval of the final version of the trust, that will obviously then be recorded, and we will make reference to all those items as set forth in our proposed language to the Conservation Commission here tonight,
Okay, and you are planning on keeping a lot of these trees along this?
along the boundary lines.
Yeah, so they're gonna, it's not gonna be this open field that this person doesn't like? Okay, all right.
All right, so we have a motion with no permanent plantings, and we have that was seconded, and we have a motion to amend the original motion to add signage demarking the wetland area. And has that been seconded, or are we adding to that motion, or?
I'll second.
All right, so that's been seconded. Now, we still have the outstanding issues as to adopting and the permanence of the, you know, of these particular conditions. I mean, we can ultimately, you know, if we get an appropriate COC and certifications and as-built, the order of conditions can be released, but certain conditions in a situation like this, you know, necessarily remain. And that's, you know, the signage and stuff, those become permanent conditions on the property. They're relatively minor, but they should be spelled out in the event, you know, for future mortgage companies and landowners. If the conditions are permanent, then at least they have advance notice that those aren't going to be released, regardless of.
Do we need to specify that those go in
Yeah,
the
we need to,
deed?
yeah, we need to specify what should remain as a permanent condition and what shouldn't.
And we haven't mentioned the homeowners yet.
Yeah, what we can do with the homeowners is, we can make it a condition of these lots that it be established and to remain permanent, but we by separate motion, like it would be a fourth motion or a fourth action, we should, you know, make a recommendation to the planning board that they adopt the homeowners association as part of the subdivision approval process.
So could I move to make the special conditions that we just mentioned, the two special conditions, as permanent conditions?
Okay. So that's a third amendment to the motion. Okay, do I have a second? Did we get a second on Commissioner Lovely's? Okay, who made, Commissioner Varnum did, okay. And Commissioner Varnum now made a second amended motion, seconded by Commissioner Gordon.
Yep.
Okay, any further discussion? And this is just Lot 5, in case anyone's keeping score. Okay, now let's work backwards on Commissioner Varnum's motion to amend Commissioner Lovely's and Beardron's motions. All in favor signify by saying aye. Commissioner Gordon?
Aye.
Commissioner Lovely? Commissioner Varnum? Chair is yes. Commissioner Lynch?
Aye.
Commissioner Beardron?
Aye.
Okay. Now, Commissioner Lovely's motion to amend Commissioner Beardron's motion. Commissioner Gordon? Commissioner Lovely? Commissioner Varnum? Chair is yes. Commissioner Lynch?
Aye.
Commissioner Beardron?
Aye.
Okay, now the main motion, now this is to issue a standard Lowell order of conditions with conditions and now with permanent conditions. Commissioner Gordon?
Aye.
Commissioner Lovely?
Aye.
Commissioner Varnum? Chair is yes. Commissioner Lynch?
Aye.
Commissioner Beardron?
Aye.
Okay, good. All right, now, so that carries. Moving on to the third lot, 6, concerning DEP file number 2060717, and this was just construction of the house within the buffer zone. Do I have a motion on that? And keeping in mind that perhaps there's nothing particular about this particular lot, but it's also part of the homeowners association, so.
What's the starting line? What's this line?
As far as I know, the buffer zone. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's. Where's that? On the plan, on the, on the sheet 4. Looking to the south of Lot 5 and Lot 6, right along that property line. Go to the northeast corner of the wetland. What flag is that?
1?
Yeah, wetland flag 1. You have a line that extends out to the east. You know, an arrowed line, double arrowed line.
Yes.
Okay, solid line. It crosses over the 100-foot buffer zone, which is the dashed light gray line, correct?
No, the leader, where it says 100, that's a little misleading. Where it says 100-foot buffer, that's actually right on, the lead is pointing to the dimension line, which is right on top of the 50-foot offset, the 50-foot offset from the wetland.
Okay, so you drew a 50-foot line and a 100-foot line?
50 and 100.
So that circle where it says 100-foot buffer and it has a pointer line and it has a little circle,
Yeah.
that's the 50-foot?
That's a 50-foot.
Okay, all right.
It's circling it, it's circling the leader, the dimension line. Unfortunately, it's right on top of the 50-foot offset.
Yeah, okay. All right, thanks. Good catch on that. All right, we still need a motion for Lot 6.
I'll make a motion to issue a standard City of Lowell order of conditions with appropriate language for the homeowners association.
Okay. Do I have a second on the motion by Commissioner Biedron,
Second.
by Commissioner Lynch? Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Commissioner Gordon?
Aye.
Commissioner Lovely? Commissioner Varnum? Chair is yes. Commissioner Lynch?
Aye.
Commissioner Biedron?
Aye.
Okay. All right, and lastly, can I have a motion something to the effect that the Conservation Commission would request that the Planning Board adopt the language of the Homeowners Association Trust and make it a permanent feature of the subdivision, that whether or not approved by the City of Lowell Planning Board, and that with the understanding that the Lowell Conservation Commission has expressly conditioned the roadway, the Lot 5 and Lot 6, upon the adoption of the Homeowners Association Trust and specific language with respect to Lot 5.
I'll make that motion.
All right, do I have by Commissioner Varnum, do I have a
Second.
second? By Commissioner Biedron, any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Commissioner Gordon?
Aye.
Commissioner Lovely? Commissioner Varnum? Chair is yes. Commissioner Lynch?
Aye.
Commissioner Biedron?
Aye.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you, good luck.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you all very much for working with us. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman and the rest of the commissioners, thank you for working with us, with the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in. Moving on to the next item on the agenda is enforcement order continued from the May 22nd hearing date. Ralph Tucci, 108 Tanner Street. Violation location is 131 Tanner Street. Dredging of soil, dumping of material which may degrade water quality, destruction of plant life within a 100-year floodplain, riverfront area, and bordering vegetated wetlands. Can we have a report on progress out there, Swati?
I had been to the site prior to the previous meeting, and I site inspected all the plantings that were located. There were two types of plantings that were dispersed, especially over the more highly disturbed areas, and the silt fence was also tightened at the loose spots as indicated from my previous. So from the DPD side, we were they have sufficiently met the requirements, and we asked them to maintain the fence until, at least until next spring through one growing season. So that's where we are.
The owners, Mr. Tucci, they've been working with you and, okay, all right. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Yes.
All right. I just stuck that in my eye. Are you Mr. Tucci?
Yes, Ralph Tucci.
Okay, all right. I'm just, we've had several people here, so I know that's, I know that's, I don't know why you have a smile on your face, because this is a serious matter, young man, so, no, I'm only kidding. They've been very responsive, and they're working with us, and the only thing that we're wanting to see now is that the siltation barrier will, remain in place for a full growing season and whatnot. I mean, do we need to keep the enforcement order in place any longer?
I'd move to lift the enforcement order, provided the silt fence is kept in good condition for the next year, just to be sure that there isn't any encroachment or destruction of the vegetation along the riverbank.
All right, do I have a second on the motion?
Second.
All right, any discussion? That was by Commissioner Gordon, motion by Commissioner Varnum. All right, do you have anything to?
No, I'll just take care of it, make sure it's, stays up and duct tape the top. Every once in a while it comes down.
Continue to work with our office?
Yeah, it's easy to work with, so no problem.
All right, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Commissioner Gordon?
Aye.
Commissioner Lovely?
Aye.
Commissioner Varnum? Chair is yes. Commissioner Lynch?
Aye.
Commissioner Beardron?
Aye.
Okay, good. Yep.
This is also in conjunction with the two adjacent properties also under the same ownership, 1 and 9 Broad Street, Brook Street, sorry.
Yeah, and they've been cooperating?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's all owned by him,
Yeah.
and the full stretch.
Yeah.
They have, and they have shared the plant information, the purchase information, everything, and it was
Okay.
site verified.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Set. And just, as I said, just stay in touch with Swati, and she'll periodically check up and whatnot, but, okay?
Thank you much.
Thank you very much. Request for determination of applicability is the next item on the agenda. Property management of Andover is the applicant. Property location is 110 and 132 Boylston Lane, and it's the installation of foundation drains around two existing buildings, partially within the wetland buffer area near the Marshall Brook and bank bordering vegetated wetland. Yes, sir, if you could identify yourself for the record.
For the record, my name is Paul Bergman. My company, Bergman and Associates from Haverhill, assembled the application. This property is on Boylston Lane, which is off Boylston Street over by 495, to put it on the map for you folks. It's a condominium complex that I think dates back to the late 60s. It's an old one as far as condominium projects go. And we were hired, my company was hired to come up with design plans for redoing the front entrances on these buildings. And one of the problems that they've had at these two buildings specifically, I think there's a total of 4 or 5 buildings in the condo complex on Boylston Lane, but one of the problems these two buildings specifically have had almost since the day they got built, unfortunately, was the lower units, the lower condo units get water in the units from the groundwater. Essentially, the buildings were built too low. And we don't believe they have any foundation drains, at least foundation drains that are working, or else they wouldn't be getting water in their units. And when we started surveying the properties to try to figure out what to do with the foundation drain water, if in fact we could even drain it somewhere, the only real place is out in the back of building 132, actually to the south of the building. The full-size plan that I put up here on the easel, the blue line around the two buildings, if you can see that from where you're sitting, is the foundation drain that we've designed. And I have to leave the microphone to point out one last point. This right here is where they exit. Over here. Thank you. And it's that exit point that required us to go before the commission. On the 5th of June, Aaron came out and met us at the site, and I explained basically what we were going to do. The entire drain is actually underground because it's a foundation drain. So the way that it works is that as the water table comes up, it intercepts that water and then sends it by gravity away from the buildings, which is the whole idea of it, to try to help dry out these bottom condo units that are getting water. There's a brook, which I've outlined in yellow, to the east of the exit point. It's either called Marginal Brook or Marshall Brook. I've seen both names, so I'm really not sure. And interestingly, this section right here is actually culverted. It's underground. And then there are wetlands about 200 plus feet to the south of the exit point. So basically the foundation drain is about 2.5 feet below the ground surface around the buildings, and it daylights into a stone-filled little basin about 10 feet in diameter, and it just works by gravity. If you have any questions.
Yeah, that's the feature to the south, the stone-filled
Yes.
basin. Is that something you're going to be building, or is that already there?
No, that's part of, it's just there's really even no velocity associated with, it's a foundation drain. So basically it's a trickle of water, but we needed a little basin area for the water to go into and then percolate into the soil.
Won't that also fill with water, though?
No, it's pretty big. And at any given time, this water should just be a trickle. But it's important because it's intercepting the groundwater table as it comes up. The water is also, you can drink it. It's aquifer water, basically. It's groundwater. So it's not, this isn't roof water or pavement discharge or anything else. It's groundwater. And Aaron suggested the request for determination of applicability, actually, and we followed his advice.
Is it within, just looking at your map up there and looking at your scale here, I assume we're talking about whether or not it's within the buffer zone? I mean, is that the resource feature that we're talking about here? Whether or not the work is performed, not within the wetland, but within the buffer zone. Okay.
Yeah, it's approximately 58 feet, correct me if I'm wrong, that number, from the bank of the Marginal Brook. It's outside of the 100-foot buffer of the wetlands, but it's within 50 feet of the bank, which is the jurisdictional area under consideration here.
And what's the footprint of that structure?
What's
the outlet for the groundwater?
It's
drainage.
about 10-foot diameter stone basin, just like a little pool that's lined with rock. That area right now is mowed grass. I should mention that. It's lawn in the back of the building.
Okay.
Typically, if you have a property and you're lucky enough to have a change in elevation across the property and you want to do a foundation drain, you can exit to daylight. If you're not so lucky to have a property that has any type of slope to it, typically you have a sump pump down in the basement and you have to pump up and out. Exactly. And here, we're lucky enough to just have enough change in elevation to do gravity.
So what I'm concluding is it's within a jurisdictional area, but we could end up issuing a -3 determination based on the scope of the work here. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Commissioner Gordon? Commissioner Varnum?
I notice on the plan I'm looking at here, you have pump chambers. You said it was gravity.
That's true. I have to get up and point again.
You can hold it. You can bring it with you. If it goes.
I'll just, these front entrances actually have a laundry room below them, which is even deeper than the bottom condo units. So we have a foundation drain, and they are nasty, wet, humid areas, and they're having problems with the electrical equipment rusting, and they're just not very pleasant. And we're going to install a foundation drain immediately in front of those, that is on the parking lot side, and they drain by gravity into a pump chamber, and then that pump pumps up and it joins the gravity lines from the building foundation. So all of the water coming out here is by gravity, but because these two little drains are lower than the foundation drains for the building, we have to collect that water and pump it up a couple of feet.
Now, are you collecting water that perhaps isn't there at the present time when you say you have a chamber that it's going to run into? Are you having a reservoir of water that you don't have now?
I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but right now, the two laundry areas have sump pumps, and they're pumping into the sewer line. Again, that's actually not allowed by code. So on a positive note, and I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but our plans call for those sump lines to be disconnected because Massachusetts law doesn't allow you to discharge roof water or any other type of water into sanitary sewer, into sewer lines, because it taxes the wastewater treatment plant. So on a positive note, we're collecting that water and just exiting it to daylight. It won't be going into the sewer line anymore.
Now, laundry rooms are notorious for flooding. Are you going to be actually dispensing, sort of dirty water from these laundry areas?
No. The washing machines have their own exit lines, and those lines go into the sewer. That's allowed. But this is groundwater. This is not collecting water off the floor of the laundry or from washing machines or anything else. It's groundwater.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Biedron?
Some of the piping is 0% slope.
Yeah.
Is that because that's where the perforated pipe is and that's where you're trying to collect?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Typically, foundation drains can either be, it depends on the engineer and the application and the project, but they can typically either be flat or at 0.5%, 1%. And the reason for that is that unlike storm drain lines or sewer lines, like in a subdivision, like the project you folks were just reviewing not too long ago, those lines need to be at a slope because they have fines and sediment and solids in them. And you need that velocity to carry those fines and sediment and leaves, branches, whatever, on its way to whatever. This water is pure. So as the water comes up and hits that perforated pipe, and the perforated pipe is situated so that the holes are at 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock, if you were to look at it, for example, on a clock face. So as the water comes up and just barely starts to go in those holes on the side of the pipe, then the water flows within that little lens area at the bottom of the pipe on its way towards whatever.
Would it be of any benefit to add a small slope to that, or? Because
It's,
isn't the small perforations, you could still maybe get some fines in there? No?
it's our details call for these pipes to be within washed stone, number one. Number two, that's wrapped with landscape fabric.
Okay,
So there's no, again, the water that's coming out the pipe at the end of this, you can drink it.
okay. And then, just the lines, so your profiles, you have A through G, and I followed that one. The other one, M through P, that's that laundry one versus the, you have like an M and an N that goes to a manhole.
Yeah, the reason for those letter designations on the profiles is more for the contractor, so that, and looking at this plan, he can see where A is with respect to that profile, and B, and M, and F, and so on. They're just points along the route of the drain lines.
So B, for example, can't tie into M because M is lower because it's the
Right.
laundry line?
Right,
Okay, got it.
yeah.
Yep, no further questions.
All right. So the cistern, and what are we gonna call this thing that's collecting the water? I mean, what does it look like, first of all?
It's like a kiddie pool, 10 feet in diameter, that's lined with stone, that's about 2 feet, 30 inches, 2 feet, 2.5 feet deep.
Is it gonna be covered so like kids don't fall into it, or pets, or?
It shouldn't normally hold water, and it's not meant to be. I wouldn't really recommend that it be covered. It's a trickle of water that goes into it during wet seasons. During dry seasons, like summer, for example, there won't be anything coming out of the pipe. It'll just be a dry basin.
So during the wet times of year when they're getting water coming into the condo buildings, this thing will be functioning. I mean, what is it? Is it filled with crushed stone, or help me out here. I'm not understanding this thing.
It's riprap.
Yeah.
It's basically what it'll just be, are big stones that you sometimes see on the side of the highway you can climb on. It's not,
Right.
it's not like a drowning condition or anything like that.
Right.
And look at it this way, as the water table rises, rather than going into the foundation of the building, it's gonna hit the bottom of that slotted pipe and then follow by gravity.
Yeah, no, I get how that works, but if the outfall is at a lower elevation, won't that already be underwater, though? I mean, I don't...
No, that elevation, that's a valid question. And we're collecting the water. Right now, the buildings are, they're built too low, too deep. And there's nothing that we can do about that because they were built back in the late 60s. And the sump pumps in the laundry are basically only taking care of the water in the laundry. They're not addressing the water coming into the units. So it's a bad situation for the landowners, for the unit owners. And these foundation drains are situated just below the finished floor of their units. Because if this is the finished floor of the lower units and the foundation drain is down here, in theory, the water comes up and hits that drain. It's not going to be able to continue up to this level because it's intercepted by the drain.
Yeah, but, and I understand that, and then it gravity feeds down to this riprap area,
Right.
but the groundwater there is lower for some reason? I mean, I
That
don't...
elevation is also lower. That's correct.
All
It's-
right.
As I said earlier when I started talking, we had to route the water to the lowest area on the property that we could find without getting too close to the brook. It was a balancing act, and Aaron saw that out in the field.
Now, and this area is about 10, 5 foot in diameter, basically?
About 10 foot in diameter.
10 foot, I meant 5 foot in
Yeah.
radius, 10 foot in
Yeah.
diameter?
And,
Yeah.
and as Commissioner Beardron said, it's one of our details, I think it's C4, shows a cross-section of the little basin and what it's lined with.
Yeah, well, yeah, C4, yeah, number 5.
Do these buildings have roof leaders for rain?
Some of them do.
And are you gonna connect those at all?
No, those conductors are going to stay in place. Some of the buildings have down conductors. The lower building, building 132, actually has this strange flat roof where they have scuppers on the side of the roof, if you know what those are.
Yeah.
Like, I don't.
If you have a flat roof and you're trying to collect the water at one exit point, it'll be the edge of the roof will have a cutout like that, so that the water will go to that area, which is called the scupper. That's an architect's term, and then it goes to that scupper and on its way wherever. Right now, that particular building, the water just comes off those scuppers and splashes on these big concrete blocks, and it's eating up the masonry on the bottom of the building, which is a separate issue from what I'm talking about right now.
You won't be taking care of that?
No, a perennial problem with a condo association is that they always have limited funds, and
Gotcha.
I'll do you one better. A scupper is a nautical term.
That's right.
And when they swabbed the decks, they had to make sure their scuppers didn't get rusted, because they wouldn't open up and allow the deck wash to
you're
get
absolutely right.
swept off the deck of the
It's
ship.
like a roof swale?
Yeah,
They're cutouts on the edge of the deck. That's
yeah. So I'm just, and this, I mean, this is a new feature to basically a lawn area. I mean, you gonna have like a little fence around it? I mean, it's not something anyone can fall into. I mean, I guess that was my biggest concern.
I really didn't even think of that or
Right.
consider it. I just don't see it a problem for a trickle of water that's going to percolate, right back into the ground.
All right, okay. So, to me, it seems like, we're almost 60 feet from the edge of the wetland and from the bank. So it's out of the riverfront area, but it is buffer zone, so to me, it seems like a fairly minimally invasive type of activity in the buffer zone, and perhaps is prudent for a -3, but,
I think that's why, I can't speak for Aaron.
is this something like it? Yeah. All right.
But I think that's why he suggested a request.
All right, we're going to submit Commissioner Beardron's iPhone as part of the official record
We
here.
have a photograph? Oh,
All right, thank you. Do I have any further questions for the applicant? All right, and there's no one here, so do we have a motion on this?
Offer a motion to issue a -3 determination for this project.
By Commissioner Lovely, seconded by
Second.
Commissioner Beardron. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. All right, thank you.
thank you. Procedurally, does my office get the letter from the,
Yes.
okay. And not to sound like I'm rushing you, but like typically, how long does it take, or?
We should get it to you by the end of the week.
Oh, all right.
This is city government. It could be several years before you get it, but most likely with these two, you'll get it by the end of the week, so.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Moving on no, we just had that. Request for certificate of compliance, Pat Carney, concerning DEP file number 206-0699. The project location is 259 Baldwin Street. I know we had a site visit there last week. Was that last Monday or 2 weeks ago? Yeah, it was a while ago. Yeah, it was 3 weeks ago now, huh? The work has been mainly done, although I did see a number of dead shrubs that need to be replaced, and the applicant has indicated that they'd do it. My big thing, though, was that, I like to see at least a year through the growing season for this area to establish. I felt that there was a lot of sandy soil, and a lot of the ground cover needs to really take over and fill in. I'm sure it will, and the applicant's going to replace the shrubbery that had failed to take. But I think perhaps we're a little bit premature on the request here for a COC, but that's my input.
I would agree. I mean, when we did the walkthrough, I mean, it's clear that the applicant meant the intent of the certificate of compliance, but I would agree that there was some dead vegetation out there, and it may be a bit premature to issue a certificate of completion, of compliance at this time. And I think the other thing we mentioned is the possibility of maybe a couple of flag markers or something along the edge there to warn the plowing that would take place during the wintertime. We wouldn't want it to rip up that riprap along the edge that was meant to slow down the water and as it enters into that area.
I mean, it's, we're here for a request for COC. I mean, if we could just have some input for a sense, because, I don't think we need to make a motion not to issue a COC, but, I mean, we can just table this for the appropriate time. We have I might make note,
Do we need to communicate with them?
we have an as-built, but as discussed, there's still, and there is a certification, but what was observed in the field doesn't quite mesh up exactly with the certification yet. I believe the performance standards also indicate a full growing season prior to a COC under the MACC actions in DEP, internal administrative reports. So again, I would rather just send them back a letter saying, we've received your request. The commission's gonna table it for a year and just put it on our calendar to bring it up at a later date. But unless someone wants to make a motion, I mean, it'll just sit, or we could make a motion to schedule it for next spring. No, probably next fall, and see where we stand at that point in time. So,
I make a motion to submit a letter to the applicant to let them know that we're going to wait a full growing season before considering issuing a COC.
all right. Seconded
I'll second it.
by Commissioner Lovely, motion by Commissioner Lynch. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. All right. Just let them know. They can, I mean, we can we can schedule it for next fall, you know, maybe, what's this, the second August meeting, or they can just resubmit. So,
Should
okay.
we let them know what plants are not doing so well? So,
Yeah, I think they're aware,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah. All right,
I'm not telling. So obviously, I've been incredibly disruptive. I just wanted to get a presentation set up on the open space plan. It's not terribly long, so
hey, that's in Utah. That's in Utah, isn't it?
it's, for those who haven't been to the Lowell Tingsboro State Forest, there you go. So it might be worth, maybe we could hand out the sign sheets for the notice of intent while I'm doing this. It'll take me just a sec.
Yeah, moving on to other business, this is concerning the draft of the open space plan, and Aaron's going to give us a brief presentation.
Does it go on that one too?
Yeah.
Wow.
All kinds of, makes all kinds of noises. Yes, they can. They have the benefit of a PowerPoint presentation is this can be viewed on ltc.org or on, I think it's Channel 8. All right. What is that? All right. I'll just bring this with me. What I just handed out are the action steps that are part of the open space plan. The actual draft plan was mailed out to you early in August. Hopefully you had a chance to at least do a cursory review of it. But what I'll do is just give you a brief overview of the plan, kind of the process for developing it. I think many of you probably are very aware of what the intent of an open space plan is and why we go through the act of building one, designing one, working one out within the community, but this is going to work. There we go. It's a little slow on the uptake, it looks like. But here we go. Really, the reason for the plan was to establish a vision for preserving and maintaining existing open spaces and protecting natural resources and historic resources in the city. It essentially creates the vision for doing so, and also a 5-year action plan for action steps and implementation steps to actually achieve that vision. It helps, what I found through this process in developing the open space plan is it's really helpful and integral to establishing a baseline data set of the existing conditions, environmental resources in the city, the needs from a natural resource preservation, open space preservation for recreational purposes and natural resource protection, and historic resource protection. Our open space plan is less heavily weighted towards the historic resources than other communities. They really use it as a tool for looking at historic preservation, but we have a very active historic board and national park in our city that does focus on those resources in particular areas. We do, however, want to look at historic resources outside of particularly the downtown and the historic review district. So this does get into it a little bit, the historic element. And then finally, perhaps, I don't want to say it's the most important, but maybe the biggest motivator for completing an open space plan is it opens up opportunities for grant funds. In this case, particularly park grant through the state. This is the Department of Conservation Services is the administrator at the state level for the park grant. It's the funds we use primarily for the construction of new and upgrade or maintenance of existing park open spaces in the city. So it's a very important grant for us. It's an annual grant that's available to us. Because it's a requirement for eligibility of that grant, Department of Conservation Services has also created a very kind of, I shouldn't say strict, but detailed kind of model for which they want to see these open space plans developed. And so we, as well as every other community out there, pretty much follows that model, and it's outlined in our table of contents. You can kind of see that played out in any other open space plan. But so this is the primary reason. In the last time we had the open space plan updated was, I want to say 7 years ago, so 2005. It's a 5-year action plan, and we need to have it in place to be eligible for this grant. There's a 2-year extension, which we took advantage of 2 years ago, and so that leads us to this point where we had to have this in place for this year's grant round. But as I said, although the grant program is a motivator for having it done regularly, the open space plan updated regularly, it's not the primary reason for doing so. It's to identify the needs for the community and establish an action plan for achieving the objectives and vision that's developed out of this. So as many of you know, or all of you probably know, the master plan for the city was updated and recently adopted by the City Council in April of 2013. In developing that plan, it was a 2-year process. We were able to piggyback off a lot of the outreach and public outreach that was implemented for the master plan update. And this graphic that's up there right now kind of demonstrates the number of outreach activities that were taking place for the master plan update, and very relevant in the creation of the open space plan. So for example, there's 800 telephone surveys that were translated into multiple languages. It was a randomly selected survey that we worked with a research firm to select the participants. They called and went through the telephone survey with the property owners, the homeowners, and in the case that translation services were needed, they were able to provide the translation for that. We received over 1,000 comments through an online participatory tool. It's called Community Planet. 175 users were involved with those. It looks a lot like Facebook, kind of an interface, but it gives people the opportunity to answer some questions that we were posing in the survey, where they're multiple choice, true, false. Sometimes there were more interactive kinds of questions, such as, in what area of your neighborhood would you most like to see an new open space or playground? And people could actually put on a map where that would be. So there's some very specific interactive kind of responses that we're able to take in as a part of that. There were 5 public visioning sessions that were conducted in the summer of 2012, so about a year ago. And a number of the sessions had very different themes, but we had one theme that was specifically about environmental resources and sustainability. And it talked a lot about, in those visioning sessions. We had a very good qualitative discussion among these ideas of how people wanted to see land used in the city, open space preservation, recreational needs, that sort of thing. And it's a very wide-ranging discussion that you get that can get into the things such as water quality, and how much impervious surface do you want to see in your neighborhood. So that's a very important qualitative aspect of that public outreach process. There was a couple other, I think, interesting actions that we took that really kind of spread out or got more people involved with the master plan than usual. We had the sustainability snapshot contest, which basically invited residents of the city to submit photos that would be part of the master plan. And what we encouraged people to do was to identify specific places that they felt were important to the city, or characteristic of the city, or worth preserving. And I think, which is pretty obvious, what a lot of people submitted were open space, recreational areas, some historic structures that are very important to the city. So it gave us, I think, a kind of a visual survey of what people what they really care about in the city. It also gave us some really great pictures for the master plan update as well. And then to kick off the whole master plan update process in 2011, there was a meeting that was held during the first annual Sustainability Week, where there's a number of kind of activities that people could take advantage of, bicycle rides. And so it kind of brought in this idea of sustainability more broadly addressing economic sustainability, social sustainability, as well as environmental sustainability. It really kicked off that process and reframed the master plan update for that reason. So we were able to use, because of the proximity of the application of this outreach process, to develop the needs assessment portion of the open space plan. We supplemented that, though, with some additional outreach that was more targeted to open space. We had a online survey that we sent out. I think many of you may have received that. We received over 200 responses, which is, I think, a pretty decent response for it. I think there's 1,000 people we sent emails to. We conducted a focus group working with Libran Consulting, and essentially, if you're not familiar with the focus group, it is about 8 to 10 people are randomly selected from the community based on a survey questionnaire to make sure that the participants broadly or align with the socio-demographic makeup of the city. And then they're invited to participate in discussion that's led by a market research firm. And so a lot of those questions were really, again, addressing what is open space, what is important for preserving urban space in the Lowell context, and also thinking about, again, historic structures. And then lastly, in November of 2012, NEMCOG began or kicked off an regional open space planning process, whereby they held a visioning session in the city of Lowell and also included participants from abutting towns. We were able to use that information, that feedback, in developing our needs assessment. And it was very helpful to think about this process from a regional perspective, which is something we felt was important in this open space planning. The regional resources that are in consideration in this open space plan don't really play by legal boundaries from city to town. They're networks that actually move beyond the region, Merrimack River, the Concord River. So it's very important that we looked at this from a regional perspective. So along with the survey work and the public outreach, there's a number of other elements to the open space plan, such as community setting. It talks about the regional context, again, the history of the community. It provides a summary of the population characteristics, the demographic characteristics of the city by neighborhood. And then there's a review of growth and development patterns over time to kind of see what the future or the future impact of growth is on land use. Then there's a very detailed section that gets into the environmental inventory and analysis, There's a discussion, in-depth discussion of geology, soils, topography, landscape character, water resources, vegetation, fisheries and wildlife, scenic resources and unique environments, and finally, environmental challenges. Brownfields is one that we see here, obviously, frequently. Dealing with the sewer separation is another environmental challenge that we're dealing with in the city, sewer overflows in our water resources. So those kinds of things are all addressed in this section. Then finally, as a part of the existing conditions analysis, there's this inventory of lands, and what's up here right now is it shows all the open spaces as they're owned this plan actually shows open spaces that are permanently protected, which is the dark green. The ones that are kind of the mid-tones of green is a limited protection, so something that is not likely to, or it can't be developed immediately without some sort of action, for instance, by the city council, if it's owned by the city. And then there's the lighter tones of green are either unknown or they're not protected open spaces right now, private or public. So you can kind of get a sense what the distribution is for the open spaces in the city. It's actually a rather, I think, an important part of the open space plan is to understand what we have now, how does it interrelate with each other, and of those open spaces that are available as recreational or natural resource protection, of those, what do we need to focus some attention on to make sure that we're protecting that permanently?
Aaron, when you say permanent, does that mean the city of Lowell owns it?
There are city parcels that are owned by the city that are not permanently protected. So just because it's owned by the city doesn't mean that it's protected open space.
Okay.
So for instance, there might be a park that hasn't been accepted by the city council as a recreational use, or has been preserved as a recreational use. The city at some time in the future could decide to put a school on it. There's a number of parks in the city that have schools on it. South Common, Shaughnessy Park, North Common, all have schools that were constructed during the 80s. And the reason they're there is they weren't permanently protected at the time.
Now, what about the reverse of that? Is there some of this permanent protected land that residents own?
There are some properties that are owned by private interests. Lowell Parks and Conservation Trust and the Friends of the Forest are the two primary. They're either owned through conservation restriction or in fee, but there are private property owners that are permanently protected.
Okay.
Would a vacant lot be considered an open space?
No, we didn't include any properties that aren't used specifically for any kind of recreational or natural resource protection purpose. There are properties that we've identified in the action plan that we want to focus some protection, whether it's through private conservation restriction or the city taking it and just putting a permanent conservation restriction on it.
Because there's a trend of vacant lands, for formerly used lands that are now becoming, for example, community gardens. That's a big trend. You see it in Boston a lot, and that may be an open space use. And the other question I was going to have is, has there been an overlay of the Mass Natural Resource Heritage Corridor Program over these open spaces to determine where there may be threatened or vulnerable species on any of those?
Absolutely. That's absolutely part of it, particularly into the environmental and inventory analysis. That is actually a required part of this planning process through DCS, but it makes sense. The river corridor, Merrimack River, is the area that we need to pay particular attention to. There's a couple areas in the state forest as well that have been identified, but they're in area that's permanently protected at the state level, the state forest. Good questions. Just to kind of address that point a little bit more, when we put together the objectives, and we'll get to those in just a second, we really wanted to focus on systems and networks and making interconnections between the important or vital natural resources that we have. So a lot of the actions are intended to enforce, strengthen some of the open spaces that we have now, and then make connections among them so that there's the potential for corridors, wildlife corridors, between and among the larger open spaces that we have in the city. but also thinking about ways to preserve natural resources and provide recreational opportunities between them as well. A lot of times, land preservation along rivers can also serve as a bicycle corridor or pedestrian pathway or something like that. So that was part of our research. Just to close out this slide, there's about 470 acres of land that is owned by the city, owned and operated by the city for open space. About 19 acres, just under 19 acres by land trust. I just mentioned those are the private property owners that have permanently protected land. And there's just over 309 acres of permanently protected land in the state forest in Lowell alone. It's about 1,200 acres total for the state forest. But I think that gives you a sense of the magnitude of and concentration of that open space. You can see in the northwest section of the city, a lot of that is permanently protected open space. So we have some large numbers of open space, but also keep in mind that it's concentrated in certain areas of the city.
Now, Aaron, not all of that land is, as you had just outlined, is owned by the city. It's owned by various entities and parties.
Well, the 470 acres is actually city-owned open space, but there's a total, that's right, there's closer to 800 acres of open space that is owned or managed by multiple entities. It's primarily the state and the city, but also the land trust, the federal government with the national park downtown.
Yeah, well, I noticed that you have a pretty good sizable chunk of the University of Mass Lowell in there too, so.
Yeah, in those, from a mapping perspective, it's a challenge to break this out, but some of the properties that are owned by UMass Lowell aren't exactly all open space. It's hard to break out the parcelization of UMass Lowell properties because it's conglomerated as under one parcel, but they have many different uses on it. But that's a very good point. There are a number of particularly recreational facilities that are owned by UMass Lowell. So I don't want to go into too much detail. I'll take any questions you might have, but I didn't want to go through this fairly quickly so that you could have a chance to absorb it. But the open space goals that were developed following the extensive outreach process that we took to build this was to ensure open space preservation recognizes and maintains the important natural resources to support biodiversity, and that we implement land management policies that result in a healthy environment. So it's really taking biodiversity into consideration when we protect open space. Again, as I just mentioned a little bit earlier, creating interconnected networks of open spaces throughout the city, and then among the open space and recreational facilities outside of the city, so in our abutting towns, there's a lot of opportunities for us to expand on those networks regionally. And that does two things. I think it makes for a stronger resource area that we're trying to preserve, but it also provides more opportunities for a larger variety of recreational uses. Introduce more open space, natural vegetation, landscape into the more densely populated areas of the city. So this can mean a couple things. It can mean small pocket parks, community gardens, which is absolutely something that we're looking more at, but also improving the public realm with more landscape trees in the street, more small landscape areas in the right-of-way. So just infusing more landscape and natural vegetation where we can in the more densely areas, recognizing that it's difficult to create new open space in densely packed areas. Ensure information is readily available and effectively communicated to the public relative to open space and recreational entities. So the idea here is that when we learned this specifically from the focus group, that not everybody who lives in the city of Lowell is aware of all the amenities that is here. Of the 10 people that participated in the focus group, 8 people, excuse me, the 8 people that only 4 of them was aware that the state forest existed, and nobody had been to it. So I think that what we found is there's an opportunity here just to let people know more about what is available to them in the city, because there's a lot of variety, and so we want to make sure that that people are getting the most use out of it. But as people use these facilities more frequently, they get a greater appreciation for the resource that it's protecting or providing a use for, so that people care more about the resources that we have and maybe get more involved. Number 5, maintain and enhance existing parks and open spaces to meet varied needs. This is recognizing the fact that not everybody's playing baseball and basketball anymore. There's a lot of different recreational uses out there. We heard a lot of feedback from residents that they'd like to see more recreational pathways for bicycles and pedestrians. This is something we heard a lot from folks, both in both surveys and also in the visioning sessions. People would like to see more access to the riverfronts with pathways and interconnections, like I said, among these different recreational resources. So it's the idea that we need to think a little bit more broadly about how we're providing uses to the public. And then lastly, preserve, maintain, and make accessible the city's historic resources, thereby celebrating Lowell's unique and rich cultural heritage. That's pretty self-explanatory. And so lastly, I handed out the action plan. Those are the specific actions that are recommended under those 6 objectives. This action plan map kind of maps that out for you. And you can again see that the resource corridors are delineated by these arrows and networks. And this is trying to, again, kind of highlight or underline the fact that we're thinking in terms of systems and trying to connect systems and make connections for the resources and recreational opportunities. It also identifies many of the enhancements to existing open spaces, proposed new recreational open spaces or conservation areas. And all of these are identified in the 5-year action plan to take place within the next 1 to 5 years. So with that, I'll leave it to any questions you might have. Just to kind of, as far as process and procedures, we've sent the draft open space plan to DCS. They're reviewing it as well. Ultimately, what we'd like to do is provide comment letters or letters of endorsement from the different boards and commissions to include with the final draft that we submit once we receive comments from the Department of Conservation Services. And obviously, if you have any other suggestions that you feel we need to include with this, we're happy to entertain them and most likely include them in the plan. And at that point, if there are any changes that you'd like to see, we can request that a vote take place in a future meeting.
Aaron, I wondered if, I know this came first, but I wonder if there's been any interface with the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments study of the Rourke Bridge replacement, because that's going to affect certain recreational and wetland areas as they're building that.
Yeah, we have had meetings with NEMCOG, and they've actually reviewed our plan, and didn't really have any comment relative to that. The study that NEMCOG actually has underway began before we started on the open space plan, but it's taking much longer. So I think really what is potentially going to happen is, of the 3 alternatives that they've submitted, one of them, which is I think the angled, the bridge alignment that aligns with Old Ferry Road, potentially has some challenges in terms of resource preservation. It's basically bank, riverfront. I think that is something that we'll want to really dive into the details once they get into the technical elements of that, if that's the chosen alternative. But I think the key issues that we'd want to work with NEMCOG and the state at that point is, how do we mitigate any impacts to the riverfront, but also, again, thinking about ways to at least provide for the opportunity to continue the boulevard pathway westward up towards Tingsboro, and potentially connecting with the boat launch that's managed by the state across from MACOM. So there's been some discussion, but we haven't really got into the details because NEMCOG isn't really very far, or the state isn't very far in their review of the bridge alignment.
I went to some of those meetings, and I think there was talk also of some replacement for the wetland and bank area lost by perhaps taking some land that the Department of Transportation owns and putting it into conservation in the area of the previous alignment of the bridge back 20 or 30 years ago. And that would be in the area of Regatta Field, which is something some of us have been working on for a long time.
Yep. Yeah, so I don't know off the top of my head the address of the property you're speaking of, but it's actually in one of our actions, the specific actions in the open space plan to have that parcel permanently protected for conservation, at the very least conservation reasons, but also look at ways to providing potential recreational opportunities. As you know, it's right next to the Hawk Valley Farm and Regatta Field. It would make for a large open space node for which we can make these connections. There's a lot of value from a biodiversity perspective, environmental perspective, and there's also opportunity for expanding recreational and almost interpretive kinds of programming out there. So that, to answer your questions more directly, we're recommending in this plan that be permanently protected. We haven't dictated through this plan exactly how that would take place. Is it the city taking it? Is it through the Lowell Parks Conservation Trust or another kind of private and not nonprofit private entity, but just that it be preserved in some way, and that we'll work with the state on that front. But I wasn't actually aware that was being discussed as a wetlands replication area, but that would fit with, I think, the long-term vision for that property.
Aaron, I think, and I don't know how this would be implemented, but some sensitivity, from the state on down through the local level, obviously with a reference to the Wetlands Protection Act all the way down through the City of Lowell Wetlands bylaw, that there be a stated purpose, perhaps in the preambles of those laws, to allow the local conservation commission to take into consideration when drafting orders and considering resource areas that access to and use of the areas for the recreational purposes is to be encouraged, with the sensitivity to the resource area itself. But I think what I'm getting at is that all sounds well and good on paper and when we're drafting it, but in real life it requires money to maintain these areas and to keep them open and to keep them pleasing such that people want to visit them. I think it became acute over this past summer and spring when the city and various private landowners were called in to marshal their forces to remove the various tent cities that had arisen in some fairly isolated but open areas along city, rivers and canalways. What I saw from walking the various sites was there's some tremendous areas still left unused in the city that, especially, the stretch from the Aiken Street Bridge around the bend past, Beaver Brook. There's just a tremendous resource area there. I know it's owned by the city, and then it ultimately meets up with University of Massachusetts land, but there is no reason why that couldn't be a very much in the vein of the Regatta Way park and just be opened up for use. There's already a river walk down there, but people don't use it because it's so isolated. And it's not very well maintained either. It's somewhat of an eyesore going down in there, but being able to maintain these areas, to keep them open, and to encourage the residents of the various the various neighborhoods to utilize these properties, allows the people of the city to really enjoy and to see firsthand, the wonderful resource that the Merrimack River is, at least, in those particular stretches. There's, it was T.J. McCarthy who accompanied us on the University of Mass Lowell property, and I know Swathi was there with us. It's somewhat difficult to get to, but there's some really wonderful beachfront property down there. Acres and acres of sandy beach, and they're not palm trees, but they might as well have been, right along the river. And you would never even know that was down there, unless you got lost, or were, in the case, were living down there. But again, the stretch along the boulevard, it's isolated from the boulevard. The Riverwalk is 20 feet below the level of the highway. You can't hear any car traffic, and it's just a great area to go for a ride or a walk or have a picnic or something like that and overlook the river, and you're looking back over at the city. It's a wonderful area, and it's a scary place to be at dusk, I would imagine. But just, if there was some way to keep those areas open and accessible and readily accessible, and for the city to encourage not only use but to maintain them, such that people would visit them and would go in there. I think that's all. It's wonderful to have open space, but if it's not maintained, people aren't going to utilize it. And if there's no access to it, people aren't going to utilize it. And it's just open space for the sake of saying that we have open space. So I think there has to be, some directive from the lawmakers on down, such that, a commission such as ourselves can take into account the stated purpose of particular resource areas is to be utilized for open space, so we can be sensitive to that and allow permitting to utilize land that are in close proximity to riverfront areas and to resource areas, provided that, they're not, running roughshod over a heritage area and whatnot. I understand that, but, that we need to account for that also, so.
I think that's a great point, and that addresses a couple of issues that we tried to include in the action plan. So one of them, most specifically to the area you're discussing, is that although I don't think a 5-year, and I'm not saying it's not possible that this could happen within 5 years, but we wanted to explore the opportunity to extend that walkway that you mentioned from I guess it's the east side of Beaver Brook along the north bank of the Merrimack towards Bridge Street, extend that around the corner to those beach areas that you're discussing to give better access to those areas, because agreed, and that the objective to look at recreational resources and conservation resources, looking at conservation resources for recreational opportunities is one of the best places that we can identify these links and provide better access, and in many ways, I guess, provide better experiences for people, because when they're not used or vacant or underutilized, they don't feel safe. The challenge with that, of course, is funding. So the other element we're trying to address in this is identify additional funding resources to support not just the development, but improve maintenance of the existing facilities that we have. And so we'll have to look into what are the best ways of achieving that, and what are the trade-offs in working with the community more broadly to identify what is the funding mechanism. But it's recognized in the plan that we need to do a little bit better on that front. And then the third element is a regulatory element, and looking at ways that not just for conservation protection through the Wetlands Protection Act or the Lowell Wetlands Ordinance we talked about, for instance, isolated wetlands, in dealing with that in the local ordinance, but identifying exemptions for work that's taking place for recreational purposes or conservation purposes, exactly that you're talking about earlier. The city or the state is going to, through DCAM, going to make improvements along the bank. Should we make it a little bit of an easier, streamlined process as long as they're meeting certain performance standards? So all of those are addressed to some degree in this, and I think it's something that we can take as a work plan going forward for the Conservation Commission. But the answers aren't easy, particularly on the funding side. Any
further comments or questions? Thank you.
My pleasure.
Looking forward to the finals and seeing where this goes and where it ends up. This is a wonderful city to live in, and people who've lived here, for longer than 25 years have seen the direction this city has gone compared, and you don't even need to compare it to other cities, but if you want to, it's only gone in a positive direction. Even without consideration of where some of our sister cities have failed to improve their own situation. It's not perfect, but for a city of this size, the size of the population, it's a very small geographic city, but it's been able to pull itself up by its bootstraps and really become an attractive place to be. I've lived here my entire life, and just seeing the downtown area, for instance, there's more people downtown at 6:30 in the evening and going later into the night on a nightly basis than there is sometimes during the business hours during the day. And, I get comments from clients all the time. I haven't been to, downtown Lowell in 20 years. I'm afraid to come into the city. And, I say, not only come on into the city for a late appointment, but, have dinner afterwards. You'll be pleasantly surprised. Take in a show, take a walk. There's a lot of things to do in the city, not necessarily related to open space, but just in general. So through your efforts and those of the city, it's gone in a great direction.
Aaron, when's that plan going to be submitted?
Well, the draft plan has been submitted to DCS already. I'm waiting for comments back from them on our draft. We've received comments back from the planning board. At some point, I expect to get comments back from the city council. What I'd like to do is, sometime in the fall, I suspect would be the timeline that once we get all those back, incorporate them into a final draft, along with any letters that we can submit with that.
That's what I was getting at, so.
Yeah.
And I was presuming an action item, or a suggested action item from us at some point in the future. And
Yes.
that action item would be a letter of endorsement for the
Correct.
final action.
Yep.
But we're not talking about now, probably sometime this fall?
Yeah, my estimate would be sometime in fall. I don't think that,
Don't remind us?
it could be a little longer, I suppose.
Okay.
But I think that the DCS, my sense, reviews these fairly quickly. And honestly, I think that's going to be the determiner of when we'll be able to submit this. If we don't hear from them reasonably quickly, I'm comfortable just incorporating the comments from the boards and the commission and anybody else that we've received from the public into a final draft and just have the boards and commissions take a vote on that without waiting on them.
So early fall, probably having a letter from the Conservation Commission in support of the city's action plan for open space would be desirable.
Yes.
All right.
What I would do to just help prompt that is actually submit a revised final draft.
Gotcha.
And probably a quick memo highlighting the changes.
Awesome.
So.
Thank you.
All right, no, we have some minutes. May 22nd, June 12th, June 26th, and July 24th for approval.
I move to approve the minutes of those 4 meetings.
By Commissioner Varnum, second.
Second.
By Commissioner Beardron, any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye, and this is for all 4.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. A motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second. By Commissioner Gordon. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, the ayes have it. Good night.